Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown, and in today's episode, we're going to explore climate change and the threat that it is, but also the opportunity that it represents for zones. And this is timely given the recently concluded COP28 in Dubai at Expo City um, special economic zone, basically. Um, they, the COP28 is basically the UN climate conference that happens where global leaders meet and discuss climate change and what we need to do to achieve net zero carbon emissions and the like. Now, in terms of zones, and I always do this, what do I mean by zones? These are designated areas, special areas, designated by a government that is slightly separate from the rest of the economy, with different rules, particularly uh, around certain incentives. One of the typical incentives is um, duty-free access to equipment and raw materials and so forth. Anything you bring in the zone, as long as it remains in the zone, is duty-free. Another one is reduced corporate income tax. So these are, specific areas, designated areas that this particular law or rule applies to. So it can be called a free zone, a enterprise zone, industrial park. There's a variety of names. It's the same thing. Now, in terms of climate change, we're seeing around the world in terms of its impact on supply chains. We right now, at the end of 2023, December 2023, we're seeing issues with the Panama Canal and drought affecting that. We're seeing in Germany and in other countries the Rhine basically running dry. We're seeing issues in the Amazon as well. One ship actually ran aground because of low water levels. We're seeing issues in the Mississippi. These are major arteries of global trade. The Mississippi carries all kinds of goods, particularly for the U.S. in terms of export market, grains. There's a lot of farm country in the central part of the U.S., and they use that as a means to literally transport it down to the ports for export to other countries. And we're seeing these climate impacts. We're also seeing where, extreme temperatures are forcing people to cut back work hours because of the just, unbearable temperatures outside and the consequences of that. So climate change is definitely real. So zones are, part of an economy. So as such, these things will definitely impact zones. So that is the threat. But also, in terms of the opportunities, this will also mean a reconfiguration. Not just This is not the only reason why supply chains are being reconfigured, but this is another factor that's causing supply chains to be reconfigured, and countries can position themselves to take advantage of these shifting patterns in trade. There's more nearshoring, making supply chains more resilient, more robust, shortening supply chains, in a sense, to get around these choke points or these issues. So that's one of the opportunities or sets of opportunities that arise from that. There's also where you see the UN proposing, UNCTAD specifically proposing SDG led zones or SDG type model zones, which would encourage zones to have SDG practices. That's the Sustainable Development Goals. I should have added, um, as well as to invest or attract investments in industries that follow. Say, you get a solar manufacturer or solar assembler. Um, you have people that are involved in water treatment or sewage treatment, things like that, or even practices, shared service practices, having medical facilities in the zones, accessible to the workers within the zones. Things like that are being encouraged, and you see it with with UNCTAD, and also with the Global Alliance of Special Economic Zones, which is connected to UNCTAD as well, and the World Free Zone Organization, amongst others. So those, you can see where, as much as there is a threat, there's also opportunities arising from these threats. In addition, to the further opportunities in terms of climate climate change, or response to climate change, you'll find that zones, um, definitely, if they're not paying attention to it, we'll have to start paying attention to it, because whatever commitments that governments have made, especially at the COP 28, and even COP 27, um, you will have to be paying attention, and also to tap into financing if your projects, whether it's building out or refurbishing or establishing, a new firm inside of a zone. You may have access to certain types of financing, that green bonds, and other types of financing, depending on what you're trying to invest in, and how you've designed your zone. Uh, in terms of even designing zones, that's another area. And designing buildings within the zones, you have to now be cognizant of climate change and the heat, and also bringing in nature-based type solutions in terms of, for example, trees and mangroves and all of these different things to ensure that you're mitigating climate change, rainwater harvesting, things like that, or even the usage of cooling as a service, using, like that they have done in Toronto, for example, using the cooling from Lake Ontario, the depth of Lake Ontario, to be able to cool the office blocks that are in the downtown core of Toronto. And there are other people that have done similar things, and these things can work in zones, as well. So simultaneously, as much as climate change is a threat to zones, it is also a opportunity to advance our economic activity. So if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe, and if you want to see me do a particular topic, just leave me a comment down below, and I'll get right back to you. Bye for now.